Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suisuiki. Coming up.
This is why we are staying focused on economic stability, security and sustainability.
Fiji's coalition government unveils its latest budget. Also,
there is no food supply to the people living in that area.
80,000 people in PNG's Porgera Valley face starvation, and ancient structures in Samoa offers clues about the origins of chiefly systems in Polynesia. The Fiji coalition government unveiled its second budget on Friday, announcing a major pay increase for civil servants with a focus on education, raising minimum wage, and finally a plan to tackle the drug crisis. Reducing government debt, improving health and education, deteriorating infrastructure, funding for women were the headline issues. But they were shadowed by a salary increase to members of parliament to the tune of $4.2 million. Alicia Foon has more.
The verdict on Fiji's latest budget is out.
It's a very good budget in light of the difficult economic circumstances that we are in. The fact that we were able to bring our debt to GDP ratio down I think is a very good thing.
USP Finance Professor Janesh Sami with his 2 cents. But it comes at the cost of everyday Fijians struggling to make ends meet. Despite the government promising to listen after widespread heavy criticism of MPs' salary increases, the public outcry has been ignored.
This is not the time to have any salary increase for members of the parliament because the first focus of the government should be on the poor and the vulnerable.
While minimum wage rises from $4 to $5, alcohol and tobacco taxes increased by 5%. Social welfare allowance remained the same at $125 a month, except for $25 a month bus fare subsidies, but the eligibility age increases from 60 to 65. Finance Minister Biman Prasad delivered the budget in Parliament with a focus on addressing the serious skills shortage and improving investor confidence.
We are strongly focused on improving our public health and medical care delivery with new hospitals and better health care. We have fully restored all fundamental freedoms of all our people, including our workers, and increased the national minimum wage. We may not have been able to fulfill the wishes and aspirations of everyone, but we have done the best we can within the resources we have.
Mr. Prasad says he's committed to lowering sky-high debt.
Our astronomically high national debt of 90% of GDP 18 months ago will fall to 78% by this time next year.
Doing the best they can, but still passing blame.
The previous government did not know, they did not care. It was all about politics and looking good for the cameras and winning votes for the coming election. They must have decided that they would worry about the cost of everything after the election was over. Well, the election is over, and it is our coalition government that has been left to deal with this problem.
Well, the main parliamentary opposition party in Parliament is imploding due to internal conflict and set for deregistration. The Fiji Labour Party made its feelings known. In a statement, it said,
"The budget does not address cost of living crisis. The minimum wage from $4 to $5 an hour is totally inadequate. In 2018, Biman Prasad was agitating for a $5 an hour minimum wage. How does he now justify keeping it at the same rate 6 years later? At the same time, the government has shamelessly gone ahead and endorsed the increase in pay and allowances recommended by the Parliamentary Emoluments Committee. It has simply ignored the huge public anger at this act of self-interest."
Although just over $32 million has been allocated to increase affordable housing, the biggest slice of the pie went to the Ministry of Education.
$778 million is provided towards education and skill development, the largest allocation in this budget. We need to improve the quality of teaching and learning in schools by ensuring that we have the best teachers, the right learning environment, the right curriculum, textbooks and other resources. Given the state of the affairs in the education sector, we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past.
Mr. Sami welcomed the investment.
This is certainly a step in the right direction, ensuring that our graduates are ready to function effectively in the labour market.
The Finance Minister previously stated more than 70,000 Fijians have left in the last 18 months, something he admits to being slow to act upon until now.
We must respond more quickly to new economic and social challenges, such as our critical loss of skills and the problem of drugs. At the same time, we have to keep up with the slow, patient work on our long-term issues. This is why we are staying focused on economic stability, security, and sustainability.
Mr. Sami questioned the $40 million increase to Fiji's military to a whopping $170 million in total. But there is now finally a plan to tackle the drug crisis with the establishment of a narcotics bureau. More than $220 million will go to improving the police force, an increase of close to $42 million. Australian police will join the Fijian police force, and a mentor will be provided to support the new police commissioner. After serious cases of drug tampering and bribery involving police officers, the aim is to root out corruption and restore integrity in Fiji's law enforcement.
The governor of Papua New Guinea's Inga province has signalled around 80,000 people in Porgera Valley face starvation following last month's massive landslide. Sir Peter Ipata says access to Porgera mine is still cut off, hampering the flow of supplies, goods and services. Lydia Lewis spoke with a community leader on the ground. Miok Michael says starvation is a real threat.
Definitely, that's a big outcry from the Porgera. Because of the landslide, people there is no food being supplied to the Porgera area, and still they are crying for the road link to Porgera.
Are you getting any indication of how much food people have left?
What I know from was there were some food being airlifted to the Porgera side, the mine side, where people about 18,000 people being affected. So they're airlifting some food supplies to the side, but that's really expensive. So what they're trying to do now is they're trying to build that temporary road to the other side of the where the mine is, and 18,000 people are. So due to the landslide and blockage of the road, there is no food supply to the people living in that area. So that has been a great concern, and the committee on the ground is still working around the clock to at least have a temporary road to supply food to the affected people at the other side of the road or landslide.
Why has it taken this long to try and implement a temporary bypass?
I think so far what I know is it's due to the misinformation and no proper communication between the local people on the ground as well as the provincial and the national disaster committee. So that has been a challenge since the landslide, and it needs a proper communication, a vocal point to communicate with from the provincial disaster committee as well as national disaster committee as well. So they need appropriate communication to be made to deliver what is required. Currently, a lot of donor fundings, donor relief supports from different organizations have come in, and it's people are still on the side where the landslide is, and there have been a temporary relief center has been built at the site close to the landslide area, and the provincial disaster community team is responding to the local affected people on the ground. And just today, they have obviously opened different routes. The road leading to the mine site has been blocked, so they are trying to open a different route from the before the mine landslide, which can reach to the mine site, which can also be helpful to the people after the landslide area. So that's what recently happened today, and there's been no long-term or recovery plan that been made yet. Still, provincial government has announced, the National Disaster Committee have announced the people to move out of the area, the affected area, because the land is still unstable, and people are just still living around that virginity. But the provincial disaster committee is advising the people, affected people around the community, to move out of the area because the land is still unstable.
And why aren't people moving?
That may be due to some community issues as well. But what I can say is there's no temporary relocation plan being made to the affected people. So that's what's causing the delay.
And what is the latest on the number of people who have been buried in the landslide? Have there been any other, what are the latest tales of survival, or what is happening now?
So far, only 5 people were dug out from the landslide area, and the hundreds are still buried. And the provincial disaster committee and the national disaster committee declared that the disaster area, the landslide area, as a mass burial zone. So far there is no other dead bodies being dug out yet. We have only 6 dead bodies has been dug out since the landslide. So the area has been declared the burial site, and the land, as I've said, the land is still unstable for people to move around.
And the national census is underway. How are people who are trapped on the other side being counted? How is the census progressing in Inga?
I think definitely it's going to be a big challenge. There is no temporary route for car to travel to actually be counted in the census program that is currently underway, and that's going to be a challenge. But if they can build the road quickly, it will be accessible, and the census can be conducted quickly. But it's another challenge I had for the committee and the people involved.
What is needed now?
What is really needed now is appropriate plan for the affected people. So those plan that can accommodate for the resettlement, appropriate building, rebuilding of those necessary service that benefits the people, the health centers, schools that need to be rebuilt for cater for the future of the kids as well as the future of the community. So the entire 3 villages were buried, and the committee in charge and the authority people on the ground need to plan forward and come up with an appropriate plan to cater for the future of the people and the community.
The origins of Airaku society in Samoa and wider Polynesia have been uncovered in a new study. Ancient rock walls and high mounds and ditches in Whaliwha on Upolu Island in Samoa offers valuable clues about how the chiefly systems may have been introduced. The study was done in partnership between the University of Auckland and the National University of Samoa. I spoke to Professor Ethan Cochrane and began by asking him when the study began.
Yes, we began this study in 2018, so long term, although we did have a few years off because of COVID. And the study seeks to understand the rise of increasingly hierarchical society in Samoa, kind of increasingly status-driven society, not only in Samoa, but also across the Pacific and frankly throughout the world. We did that by looking at changes in the archaeological landscape, by noting the timing of the building of large boundary structures and platforms, ceremonial platforms and housing platforms, and how all of that construction is associated with a really dramatic rise in population in Samoa about 1,000 years ago that we know about through a kind of related genetic study. So putting all that together, we were able to determine that all this construction activity likely is associated with kind of the bounding or the demarcation or the creation of boundaries around very agricultural areas of really high potential, so that people were kind of securing resources for themselves, so to speak. And the kind of, I guess, group behaviors that requires, we argue it also requires kind of increasing leadership and status differences. And so that kind of resource control probably is a pump primer for the beginnings of really hierarchical society in Samoa.
So by the way that you're explaining the study, it sounds to me that the origins of Polynesian hierarchy started in Samoa. Would you agree with that?
Yes and no. I mean, Samoa is often called the birthplace of Polynesia, and indeed. And yes, I think Samoa may be one of the earliest places where this began. Now, the question is that are those changes in status and leadership and hierarchy and association with resources, is that whole process then brought out into East Polynesia by the people who settled East Polynesia from places like Samoa, and then in Aotearoa and elsewhere? Or did that same process occur independently in different areas? I mean, it's probably a bit of both, but we can see these same kinds of processes likely explaining similar changes in other parts of the world at different time periods and in areas that are totally, unrelated to the Pacific. And so that can't be, it was brought there by the Samoans, so to speak. So it might be a bit of both, a bit of similar processes occurring in different populations, but also people from Samoa taking these ideas, these behaviors, these processes out into the Pacific.
You've also done previous studies where you looked at the rise in population in Samoa, and now this study. What was it about Samoa that sparked your interest in the first place?
I've worked in the Pacific Islands for, 30 years, since the mid-1990s. And in Fiji and Hawaii and Micronesia and New Guinea. And I began working in Samoa first, in American Samoa, about 20 years ago, and just as some kind of small little projects. And then about 15 years ago or so, or 13 years ago, I started looking at Samoa more closely, realizing there's actually a huge number of unanswered questions from an archaeological perspective, unanswered archaeological questions about Samoa's past. What were the earliest populations like? How large were they? And where were they across the islands? Where exactly did they come from? What did they do? How did they engage with agriculture? How did they modify the environment? How do those populations change in complexity? Again, from an archaeological and anthropological standpoint, we really knew hardly anything about those issues compared to other places like Tonga or Fiji or Hawaii. There's been a huge amount of kind of archaeological and anthropological research in a place like Hawaii, but not so in Samoa. So I just found a lot of those kind of puzzle pieces hadn't yet been fit together by archaeology and anthropology.
There was also a lot of reliance on technology in this study, but how much local indigenous knowledge did you lean on to validate your findings?
A huge amount. So when I work in Samoa, we work with large teams, in particular with the Center for Samoan Studies and my colleagues there, kind of organizationally and thinking through things. But on the ground, day to day, going out in the villages, I work with Aumonga, with kind of the men of the village under the direction of the Matai of the village. And when we're out there, say, cutting through bush with machetes to find these structures, to relocate them, because we have an idea of where they are from our mapping technology, or to excavate these structures to find charcoal, to date them, constantly talking with my friends, the guys I work with in the village, about land boundaries, what they were in the past, kind of through traditional knowledge, what they are today, the boundaries that we've discovered with our colleagues in Samoa related to these massive rock walls. Are they different, or two contemporary boundaries, or ones known traditionally or not? And sometimes they are actually quite different. The names of structures. So a lot of these structures are, well, it's not a lot, but many structures that we find, big ditches, massive platforms, are of course named and have histories associated with them. So we learn all of that.
New Zealand's national football team coach says they're not going to underestimate Vanuatu's home advantage for Sunday's OFC Nations Cup final. Koroi Hawkins reports.
The All Whites are yet to concede a goal at the tournament and dominated Tahiti 5-0 in their semi-final match. They also thrashed Vanuatu 4-0 in pool play, but coach Darren Baisley says their focus is on preparing for finals footy.
whilst that result was that back then, I think we all know it's a final and it's a different game. Having already played each other, sometimes that creates different challenges. So it's going to be an interesting game. I think, there'll be a really big crowd, which is exciting. It should be a really good day.
Vanuatu's coach says they have to play a perfect match to stand a chance against New Zealand. The hosts are having a dream tournament under talismanic captain and Central Coast defender Brian Kaltak, who's helped them defeat Pacific football powerhouses Fiji and Solomon Islands to reach their first ever OFC Nations Cup final. But Giuliano Schmeling says they are all too aware they will have to bring their A game if they hope to compete.
We know and we respect New Zealand. Most of the players are pretty much professional players. We know that we need to get prepared. I think we need to do a perfect game to be able to get the title. I think if we learn from the mistakes we had, for the game we had, I think there is a potential for us to come and finally compete against New Zealand.
The match in Port Vila kicks off at 4 p.m. New Zealand time and is live and free on FIFA+.
That's Pacific Waves for today. To listen back, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.